Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome the members of the media who are here today and thank them for participating in today's press conference. I would also like to express my sincere thanks to those who work tirelessly to provide aid and support in our community as we continue with our work to deal with the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Many persons have been negatively affected, and I wish to extend my heartfelt sympathy to those who have recently lost loved ones or have experienced other tragic losses. Our commitment to assisting in whatever ways we can remains unwavering. I am pleased to advise you today of information highlighted in a recent press release published by Moody's Investor Service to announce the completion of a periodic review of the Bermuda government ratings. In general, the review sheds a positive light on Bermuda and the efforts made by this government to navigate the country through the current pandemic and to build for the future. The report echoes the same sentiments as their annual credit analysis published earlier in the summer, which also speaks favorably of the government's stewardship during these turbulent times. This marks the second time in 3 weeks that I've been able to announce encouraging news from a credit reporting agency after having reported on October the 12th of a favorable assessment by Kroll Bond Rating Agency. The periodic review released in late October by Moody's is published for information only and does not announce a rating action. However, it reiterates the key conclusions reached from their most recent action, which was published on the 2nd of July of 2021. As a result of that review, Moody's affirmed Bermuda's A2 issuer and senior unsecured bond ratings, along with a stable outlook. This rating affirmation, which confirmed that there is no change in rating since a similar review was done last year, once again indicated that Bermuda's bonds are seen to be of good quality with a low credit or default risk. In their July 2021 annual credit analysis, it was noted that Bermuda's ratings were underpinned by the country's very high level of wealth, strong institutions and regulatory framework, and commitment to prudent fiscal policy. The stable outlook reflected their assessment of policymakers' continued commitment to prudent fiscal stance that will contribute to stabilizing Bermuda's debt burden in the next 2 to 3 years, following the significant economic shock experienced in 2020 as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. The Moody's analysis specifically spoke to the fact that the Ministry of Finance released the Economic Recovery Plan in May of 2021 to boost economic growth and equity in the island, and that the plan shapes Bermuda's fiscal and economic priorities. Continuing their commentary on the economy, it was reported that Bermuda's low tax regime and a business-friendly environment, enhanced with a robust regulatory framework of international standards, contributed to its status as an important global insurance center. It also mentioned that the development of hotels such as the St. Regis, which opened in May of 2021 and has so far employed over 100 local hospitality workers, will increase room capacity on the island and boost overall tourism performance in the years to come. In relation to the government's fiscal strength, the Moody's analysis states, and I quote, "The current Progressive Labour Party government has maintained fiscal consolidation, which allowed Bermuda to keep debt metrics relatively stable," end quote. The public should take note that this was accomplished despite significant economic contraction and higher crisis-related spending adding increased pressure on Bermuda's debt burden. The report further emphasized that Bermuda's debt burden continues to be in line with that of A-rated peers, and it also expected that Bermuda's fiscal performance will remain stronger than that of related peers. Moody's October 2021 periodic review repeats many of the same statements that were written in the agency's July of 2021 annual credit analysis. It highlights the strength of Bermuda's institutions and governance, reflecting a strong institutional framework and a fiscal policy track that builds credibility by arresting the deterioration of the government's finances in the context of adverse economic conditions. Overall, both reports reflected positively on Bermuda and the fiscal management approach being taken to shape the direction that our country is heading. It is gratifying to see that similar themes have been highlighted in the rating agency reviews that have been published this year on Bermuda, whether by S&P, Moody's, or KBRA. As I mentioned in my press statement on October the 7th, these rating affirmations will help allow Bermuda to continue to access capital at relatively favorable rates. The assessment by Moody's further affirms the government's approach to the management of fiscal matters and its future program in that regard. We look forward to progressing government's plans to, in a fiscally prudent and considered manner, strengthening the economy, reduce our debt, assist our people, and create employment opportunities. Although the pandemic may continue to present challenges in our recovery efforts, the government is determined to position Bermuda to prosper in the long run. In light of the foregoing, I believe that it is important at this time to address the article that appeared in the Royal Gazette recently. I think the date was October the 20th. The article was entitled, as it appeared online, OBA Raises Doubts About Use of Kroll Bond for Bermuda Report. In this report, the leader of the opposition, who also happens to be the shadow finance minister, is credited with making several quotes in relation to KBRA's review of Bermuda's debt, which I highlighted in my press conference on the 12th. I would like to specifically refer to a few of those comments. The first quote that I will mention is as follows, and I open quotation. The question floating around Bermuda's financial community is, who is Kroll Bond Rating Agency? Where did they come from? In response, I would note that KBRA, or Kroll, has rated their first transaction in 2011, and to date have issued 48,000 ratings across 3,400 entities. Kroll rates several countries, including the US, Canada, the UK, Japan, Mexico, and Bermuda, among others. Kroll also rates Lloyd's of London, whose CFO, Burkhard Kies, has specifically recognized the agency in comments noted in a Lloyds.com article back in April of 2021. Excuse me. The article entitled, Lloyds Appoints a New Rating Agency and Receives AA- Financial Strength Rating, attributes the following statement to Mr. Kies, and I quote, we are delighted to appoint Kroll Bond Rating Agency and add a AA- stable outlook rating to sit alongside our financial strength ratings from our existing agencies. We believe it is important to have a diversity of views in the ratings market and welcome KBRA as a new entrant that will provide a fresh perspective on Lloyd's, end quote. The article detailing the opposition leader's comments on KBRA also addressed additional issues for which I believe it is important to provide clarification. In this regard, I refer to the following comment, and I quote, what made KBRA so attractive to the PLP government that it would spend even more money for its ratings, and how much more credibility did it buy? There is more to this credit assessment than meets the eye. A further related quote, and I open the quotation, so why are we deviating from our long relationship with the gold standard of international credit rating agencies that are intimately familiar with Bermuda's unique economic model, end quote. In response, I must clarify that KBRA is not compensated by the Bermuda government for the surveillance report that they produce on our country. KBRA approached the government in 2018 to start producing annual sovereign ratings, as they were already providing ratings for several Bermuda-based companies, including insurance and reinsurance companies and other financial institutions. As they rate several companies operating in and from Bermuda, they believed it prudent to rate the country as well. Regarding the second quote, the reference to the gold standard of international credit agencies was presumably meant to refer to Moody's and S&P, with whom Bermuda has had a long-standing relationship. I would highlight that Bermuda has certainly not severed our relationship with either of them. Those two agencies still rate Bermuda annually as per normal. In fact, I reported in the House of Assembly on May the 7th of 2021 on the generally positive report from S&P, and now in today's press conference, we're providing this update on the Moody's assessment. Therefore, although unsolicited, the government welcomes the diversity of independent feedback that KBRA represents. Additionally, I would emphasize that all the rating agencies have expressed similar support for the prudent and balanced approach that this government is taking to manage the economy through what is for all countries around the globe an extremely challenging time. There's one further section from the article criticizing the publication by the government of KBRA's positive review that I would like to speak to. In this section, the following quote is attributed to the opposition leader, and I quote, "Could it be that KBRA was the only credit agency who was willing to help the government showcase its fintech and digital commerce industries? Stay tuned. There is more to this appointment, and we await the details," end quote. To reply to this, I would like to quote 3 sentences from the July 2nd, 2021 Moody's annual credit analysis. These are, and I quote, "The government also continues to develop its fintech sector on the island using its strong regulatory framework to become an incubator in this globally developing sector. The regulator maintains high standards to protect its world-renowned reputation. If the fintech sector becomes successful, it will likely help diversify the economy, building on Bermuda's established financial sector," end quote. Given the focus globally on digital and fintech matters, and Bermuda's own work in this regard, it is to be expected, therefore, that all reputable rating agencies will carry out an assessment in this area. It is noteworthy that the conclusions reached by Moody's in this regard are not dissimilar to the relevant reviews also expressed by Kroll Bond Rating Agency. In summary, I would therefore note that Kroll is a quality and reputable rating agency, and it is noteworthy that Kroll are not the only rating agency to see potential and value in the government's work to stabilize, strengthen, and grow the economy, as well as to endorse the sound and prudent fiscal approach being taken by government. Similar conclusions have also been reached by Moody's and S&P. As I conclude, I would once again like to thank the Ministry of Finance team and all of those in the public and private sector who are working with us as we seek to effectively manage Bermuda's fiscal affairs and to get the word out on the impact of that work. Ensuring that the public gets the facts around Bermuda's ratings is important. As I have previously stated, Bermuda's credit ratings are critical when it comes to our ability to borrow money at favorable rates, and are also relevant to the companies who operate from and within Bermuda. They are also key to the continued strength and growth of our economy. Therefore, we will continue to do what is necessary with the support of the people of Bermuda to maintain and strengthen those ratings in a way that helps to secure the brighter, better tomorrow for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We'll now take some questions from the media. Jonathan Dodd from the Roger Beck.
Good afternoon, Minister. Thanks for having us.
Good afternoon, Jonathan.
Yeah, you actually touched on the economic recovery plan there, sir. I know there's a good number of items on it, I believe 31, but I was hoping you might be able to perhaps give the specifics on any top ones, medical tourism, vertical farming, what have you. But are there any specifics that you can reveal today on them?
Well, there are 31 items in the economic recovery plan. We've recently engaged KPMG to come and work with us to help to run a project management office to help to kind of guide the work needs to be done with respect to advancing the 31 items on the ERP. Some items are already in train, others have not yet started, but the idea behind hiring KPMG is to provide some degree of organization, because this work will have to happen outside of the regular work that's being done by public officers.
Has the hiring of KPMG been announced already? That's a new one to me.
I'm not sure if it's been announced, but if it hasn't been, then you've heard it first from me.
Yeah, I believe I have. When did that happen, sir?
Within the last 1 or 2 weeks.
And there will be, will they have something to announce at any particular point?
Well, Jonathan, the reason behind hiring a project manager is there are 31 initiatives that require someone to focus on the day-to-day oversight of those items. We still have to run the day-to-day operations of the government. And so we thought that it might make some sense. And we've announced this before, I think, when I released the Economic Recovery Plan, that we may need to bring in external resources to kind of help us to get this work done. And so we've talked to some of the accounting firms here. KPMG have been selected, and they're going to be helping us to run the program.
Got it. Would it be possible to find out if there's a price tag for something like that? Is that something that you can reveal?
We can get back to you with an answer on that.
Right, so I'll move on. There was mention in the plan of setting up, they call them regulatory sandboxes in Bermuda. Is there any legislation with the House coming back in that you can tell us about that's going to be coming in connection with these regulatory experimental schemes here?
I know that there is a regulatory sandbox already in place at the BMA. I think other regulators are also looking at similar constructs to encourage innovation in Bermuda. So I know the Minister of Home Affairs is looking at working on something in terms of sandbox with respect to energy.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I'd heard that GenCom had come to the island to meet with you regarding, obviously, the Fairmont Southampton. Can you tell us about it, when you met, if there's been any progress on the financing of the redevelopment?
So they were in town, I think, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. They came down with some investors who are interested in working with them on the redevelopment. These folks would be capital. We met with them, with the prospective capital providers. We had a very cordial exchange. They exchanged with us some term sheets. The term sheets are being reviewed by my team, and we're contemplating re-engaging with GenCom and their partners in the coming weeks as we understand what is being proposed in the term sheets and to indicate what our disposition is with respect to them.
Obviously, it's your meeting, but is it promising, particularly in terms of financing?
I think, this has been a very difficult environment from a capital perspective.
Yeah.
Initially, when the pandemic hit, the opportunities for capital to be deployed in hotel projects internationally was fairly low. That has improved considerably as time has gone on. And so I'm encouraged by the meetings. The folks who they brought here are quality names. And so we would have to figure out what works best for the government in light of the construct that's been presented so far.
When's the decision likely on?
I think we are working feverishly to try to ensure that we get this done sooner rather than later, but we have to do it properly.
Yes. Just a few more, sir. Piggybacking on that, we had heard there were some issues with Elbow Beach Hotel. I wanted to know if they had, if there's been any discussion with the government, if you're aware of their position, if you know if the hotel is up for sale.
I'm not aware of any discussions that have gone on with the government. You will appreciate that the Elbow Beach property, it falls within the tourism portfolio, and I think that you would best direct those questions to the Cabinet Office.
Fair dues. Just quickly now, I wanted to check on the unemployment benefits program. Is it still going on? Do we have any figures on what's been paid out and what's been recovered on that program?
Well, we stopped the ordinary course unemployment benefit program back, I believe it was in July. The program expired. There is still supplementary unemployment benefits that are being paid to persons who have been unemployed for extended periods of time. And then there's still a quarantine benefit being paid to persons who are required by the Ministry of Health, Department of Health, to mandatorily quarantine. The numbers are considerably lower than they used to be. You will recall that last year we spent in the order of $60+ million. Yeah. This year, I think we've spent about $10 million so far.
This fiscal year, or
this fiscal year?
This fiscal. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any? Because you were attempting to recover some funds as well, I believe. Is it a significant amount, or can you?
Those efforts are still underway. The team is still working on it. And I don't have the most up-to-date numbers in terms of the recovery amounts yet, but I know that they are making some progress.
Okay, last one for me. So I did notice at the delegates conference there was some, the Premier was talking about knock-on inflation, rising prices, and then this type of thing. It was a little grim. It's a grim time. I just wanted to touch on that. If there's anything that ministry-wise you're able to do to kind of head off these things, where he was alluding to rising prices and the knock-on effect of inflation on Bermuda.
Well, I think what the Premier was expressing was the very clear view and the obvious view that the pandemic has certainly led to a bit of a crisis with respect to the supply chain. And because of the dynamics of supply and demand, lower supply and high demand leads to higher prices. So we will probably not be spared from that. And I think what the Premier was doing was kind of advising the public of kind of what is actually happening globally and what the potential impact could be on Bermuda. What we can do in terms of arresting, there's very little that we can do in as much as we import most of the goods that we consume here in Bermuda. So we'll have to be extra vigilant in terms of how we spend our precious resources.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Gary from the News Broadcast.
Thank you, Minister. Just seeking a little clarification of something from a few months ago. This predates the economic recovery plan, but you said in this year's budget, quote, Bermuda will return to a balanced budget in 3 fiscal years once tourism has fully recovered from the pandemic, end quote. Are you still basing a timeline on that?
That is the plan that we're working to, Gary. We set out in the budget statement earlier this year a 3-year plan to recover back to 2019 levels. And so our goal is to get to a place where tourism recovers to before the pandemic. And we gave ourselves 3 years to do that.
I don't think anyone is expecting tourism to recover quickly. Last time I spoke to someone high in the tourism sector, they pointed to at least 2023 before anything would happen that could constitute a recovery. And even that was guesswork. Don't you think that using such a moving target as a marker could be construed as kicking the can down the road instead of actively cutting certain projects or jobs or increasing certain taxes?
Well, there's a lot to unpack with that question, Gary. I think what we tried to do in my budget statement earlier this year was to set out a thoughtful approach to the recovery of the economy in light of the damage that has been caused by the pandemic. What we did is we said that it's going to take us about three years to get back to pre-pandemic levels. At the time, that was our best thinking. We don't see a need at this point to refine that thinking any further. We're still looking at 2023, 24 as being the return to tourism. If things go according to the plan with respect to the Fairmont works, and we can find a way to agree on how the government can be supportive, it is not unlikely that in 2023, 24, the largest hotel on the island will reopen and be available for more guests. And so there's a correlation between the recovery of tourism and having the availability of spaces for tourists to stay.
You did speak to credit ratings that we've spoken about today being vital for borrowing money at favorable rates. What are we looking at in terms of the increase of national debt over the next year, 2 years? Do you expect it to go up?
Well, Gary, you're very well versed in my budget statement. You mentioned the 2023-24. Also in that statement, I indicated that when we borrowed money last August, we went to the market and took great thoughtfulness around figuring out what we would need to fund us through a recovery. So we borrowed enough money to last us through 23-24. In fact, what we said is that we were going to have a budget deficit last year of about $275 million. We came in closer to $250 million. Our plan for this year is a budget deficit of about $124.7 million. Next year, roughly $43 million. And in 23-24, projecting a modest surplus. So our plans at the moment have us glide pathing back up to a balanced budget. We have borrowed as much as I'm prepared to borrow at this point, And I think everyone is focused on strategies to ensure that we live within our means and get ourselves to deliver on the numbers that we promised that we would deliver on. I mentioned in my last press conference that in next year we have about $450 million of debt that's maturing, and then the year following another $450 million. It is important for me and for the country that we hit our numbers, because next November I will be going out to the market to seek to refinance debt that is maturing in December of 2022 and January of 2023. It is important when I interact with those investors, when they ask the question, you said you were going to do X, what have you done? That I be able to point to what we've done. And what we said we were going to do is deliver a deficit of 124.7. And so I'm obliged to figure out how we get to that number or better.
How are we doing, obviously, now, 7-8 months on from the budget? How are we doing for target for the next budget in terms of the debt?
We've just finished the mid-year 6-month numbers. We're still finalizing the results. It's still too early to say, but we're very focused on it. We keep a watching brief on it regularly. That way we can make adjustments as we need to, and we still have 6 months in which to make adjustments should they be required.
Will we hear those midterm results?
I'm planning on doing a ministerial statement, I think around the 12th of November when the House is back in session. I think the topic will be on the mid-year numbers, so stay tuned.
Thank you. Speaking about credit ratings, etc., in some ways means very little to some islanders who are only seeing their costs increase, whether it be groceries or healthcare, or even changes from government costs, how stamp duty is worked out so that tenants and landlords must pay more to government. To what degree does an increase of costs to the average Bermudian play a part in our balancing of the budget in 3 or 4 years' time?
Well, the budget is what the government takes in terms of tax receipts and fees versus what it spends. And our credit rating is linked to our ability to service our debt as per the contracts that we enter into. So it's important that people understand the importance of credit ratings. So Bermuda has a rating of A-, and so our insurers and reinsurers who base themselves here cannot have a rating that is higher than the sovereign. So they are capped at our rating. Their cost of capital is directly linked to their rating. If their rating declines, then their cost of capital goes up. If their cost of capital goes up, then they have to figure out how do they make more money to return an appropriate return to their investors. They can do it in 2 ways. They can increase their prices and render themselves non-competitive, or they can find another place where the capital treatment is more favorable. So we protect our credit ratings because it is essential to how our economy sustains itself. Similarly, banks in Bermuda also look at ratings, and their cost of capital is tied to their own ratings, but also to ours. So inasmuch as our ratings get downgraded, the potential cost of lending or borrowing money in Bermuda can also go up. So we guard our ratings very, very fiercely. And so I took some time today to kind of respond to some of the comments that were made a few weeks ago, because what I don't want to have happen is for people to not understand the importance of this issue. I'm not seeking in any way to kind of politicize it, because I think my job as the Minister of Finance is to make sure that the country stays on a very, very firm fiscal track. I don't play games with ratings at all. I can't afford to, because the country can't afford to. So they're important, and we watch them closely.
Thank you, Minister. I've covered everything I want to.
Thanks, everyone.